After Kreia first teaches you how to read people in your environment through the Force, before you continue that lesson, you can come back to her and ask her if there's anything else that she can teach you.
When I spoke of sight before, there is a similar handicap that tends to occur among those strong in the Force. They neglect their skills. Some believe they no longer need them. The greatest wielders of the Force are those that maintain some grounding to the more physical realities of the universe.
As a refresher, this is what she meant by sight being a handicap.
I see all that I need, though the seeing of things flesh and blood has failed me some time ago. They were distractions only. If need be, I could heal them, restore my sight, but sight can prove a distraction. When one relies on sight to perceive the world, it is like trying to stare at the galaxy through a crack in the door.
Relying on sight alone to perceive your surroundings is a limitation, she's saying. And also, sight can be a distraction. And we all know that's true. Beautiful people, for example, can be one of life's greatest diversions. One of the worst things you can do is follow the idiom, putting all your eggs in one basket. Another is becoming complacent. These are handicaps that people can sometimes place upon themselves. It's far worse in this scenario because you're placing all your abilities to survive and thrive in this one thing, and this thing happens to be the Force. You need to retain the abilities and powers that come from within yourself. May the Force be with you is a popular saying to wish people well. You tell them that you hope that the Force is with them, because if it isn't...
And what are they without the Force? Take the greatest Jedi Knight, strip away the Force, and what remains? They rely on it, depend on it more than they know. Watch as one tries to hold a blaster, as they try to hold a lightsaber, and you will see nothing more than a woman, or a man, a child. The greatest wielders of the Force are those that maintain some grounding to the more physical realities of the universe.
Notice how she thinks a bit before saying physical realities of the universe. Since the Force isn't tangible, you can't touch it or anything, but as Kreia herself says at a different time, the Force can be used as almost anything, blurring the lines.
Nothing is impossible with the Force. It is an energy that flows through all living things, and like energy, it may be harnessed, channeled, and consumed at times. It may even be a substance that can burn and ignite.
Following this, you can ask Kreia to clarify.
Some wielders of the Force have mastered piloting, others the ability to fix and repair and build, from simple moisture vaporators to more complex machines such as droids and vehicles. One's ability to understand the human body and its ailments, for example, can make your powers within the Force more complete, more powerful, when you attempt to repair the cellular damage of another. And others have mastered the more subtle work of politics, persuasion. Do not doubt that a galaxy may be conquered with words, a republic overthrown, and an empire made. When such skills are honed, one's abilities with the Force become that much stronger. My warning to you is this. Do not rely on your companions to compensate for your weaknesses in skill. There will be times they will not be there to help you when needed.
Kreia is absolutely correct in that final statement. It's not just a rhetorical statement. There are actual moments within the game itself that forces you to play without other party members. Nar Shaddaa, Malachor 5, the Tomb of Ludo Kresh, confronting Atris, and you might even throw in the first half of the Peragus facility. This lesson is universal. There are several moments where you play other characters alone. You play as both Mira and T3M4 twice, and you technically play as HK-47 as well. You also get to play as Bao-Dur's remote and the Zerga droid B4D4, but we're not going to count them, as they don't have the capacity for self-improvement. Kreia tells you to not rely on others, but I feel I should make this clear. She's not telling you to be a loner or to never ask for help and always handle your issues by yourself. She's telling you to not be dependent on other people to resolve your problems. Don't have them complete you. People can augment, but not replace your arms and legs. Kreia then proceeds to ask the exile,
what skill would you say is your greatest strength?
Whichever of your skills have the highest stats will appear as options.
And what skill would you say is your greatest weakness?
And whichever of your skills have the lowest stats will appear as options.
Then my task before you is this. Take your greatest weakness, devote effort to it, strengthen it, and I will show you how it shall strengthen your power in the Force.
This is something that I myself and perhaps everyone should at least attempt. Make a concentrated effort to develop your weakest skill. I would argue that I'm not particularly proficient at most things. I don't have any obvious talents, and talents are abilities that you're born with. However, skills require work. They need to be developed. There's a saying, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. The first time I heard it was from NBA player Kevin Durant, but apparently the quote is attributed to basketball coach Tim Notke. You may not have natural talent, but you can improve. You may not become the greatest ever, but you don't have to be. I may not be a very talented video and image editor, but I am improving. At this point, you're given 3 dialogue options. All of them lead to Kreia giving you the same response, but they're not inconsequential. The first option reads, "Very well, I shall take this lesson to heart." Choosing this option will gain influence with Kreia. As a teacher, Kreia very much enjoys it when her students listen to her. As we saw in Nar Shaddaa, if after she counsels you about the beggar, you tell her that there is wisdom in her words. The third option reads, "That seems beneath me." Choosing this response will obviously cause you to lose influence with Kreia. It suggests that you are saying that improving your own natural skills are beneath you. Why? Because you can use the Force? After she just told you that such a practice is a self-imposed handicap. The second option reads, "How do I do that?" referring to taking your greatest weakness and strengthening it. With this dialogue option, you neither gain nor lose influence with Kreia. Asking questions seems to be something that Kreia is never against, and it's almost always a surefire way to get through a conversation without accruing either light or dark side points. But as I've said, however you answer, she will always give you the following response.
As you learn and train and test yourself against the galaxy, all your skills have a chance to improve and grow as well. When you devote some of that training to your weakest skill, you will know.
This is another example of dialogue cleverly masking a video game mechanic. Learning and training grants you experience points that you can, in turn, allocate towards your weakest skill. There are moments and ways to increase certain skills without allocating points, but it's not entirely like the Elder Scrolls series, where directly through gameplay, you actively have to use a skill to improve it, making the Elder Scrolls a closer representation of real life in that regard. Unlike what YouTuber casually explained would have you believe, you aren't granted any skill points every birthday to allocate, and that's technically for the best. It's one of the teachings of the Sith I agree with.
It is conflict that improves the lot of civilization and single being both. Conflict forces one to better oneself. It forces change, growth, adaptation, evolution, or death. These are not our laws, but the universe's. Without conflict, you have only stagnation.
A culture's teachings, and most importantly the nature of its people, achieve definition in conflict. They find themselves or find themselves lacking. Too long did the Republic remain unchallenged. It is a stagnant beast that labors for breath and has for centuries.
Without strife, your victory has no meaning. Without strife, you do not advance. Without strife, there is only stagnation.
Developing a skill is about growing, overcoming obstacles, discipline, and learning. You can't get that from simply allocating points granted to you. It's the same with losing weight. Throughout the past couple of years, I lost weight and got into better shape. I changed my eating habits, learned about alternatives to things, and how bad and easy overconsumption of sugar is. I developed greater discipline to work out and eat healthier. I wouldn't have done any of that if I could just take a pill. The one thing I couldn't quite develop a definitive answer on is how Kreia says that developing your natural skills will also improve your abilities in the Force. I try to imagine talents as being like Force powers. In that case, we go back to the old saying, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. A talented individual can only stand to augment his talent by improving his skills. But I consulted with fellow YouTuber 100% Star Wars again, and he had the following to say. I think this leans comparatively into the spiritualistic side of things. Some say meditation and stuff allows one to connect with their mind and body on a deeper level. Perhaps it shares a similar mantra. Those who connect with themselves on a more physical plane connect with the Force on a deeper level too. Because true, the Force is grander than one person, but that one person is a conduit for it to be brought into the physical realm, and if they want to fully realize their potential, they must fully understand themselves physically, for the mind, the Force in this case, and the body to synchronize so well. A good enough explanation as any. Although I did point out that we don't need to replace the mind with the Force, since it seems you do need a particular state of mind in order to use the Force effectively and at will. He agreed and amended his statement saying that all three have to work in tandem.
A Force-sensitive, broadcasting such emotions puts themselves at a risk of not using the Force properly, since to use it seems to require an inner calm that most meatbags do not possess.
After finishing your assigned homework and improving your weakest skill, you can return to Kreia and inform her.
Have you done as I asked?
Depending on which skill it was, the exile would say that she's devoted herself to it, and Kreia would tell you something regarding that skill.
Very well. Then know this. Many are the times I meditate in the silence of my chambers. Do you know why I do this? I do this so that I might center myself, listen to the currents of the galaxy. There are others who may achieve this in occupying the mind, in achieving a moving meditation where operating on machinery achieves a similar effect.
There is a direct example of this within the game itself. If the exile has a high enough skill in repair, they can work on T3-M4 to repair and upgrade the droid. After every procedure, T3 comments, seemingly asking if you're okay. You had a glazed look over your face, like you were in a trance. The exile can sometimes respond by saying that she's calm when working on T3, or it feels as if she was in meditation, or she rationalizes by saying that since she's working on T3, she needs to shut out the rest of the ship. Either way, the same thing is happening every time, and it's what Kreia described. The exile is centering her mind by occupying it, and developing a moving meditation. This becomes even clearer if you also have a high computer use skill.
Very well. Then know this. Many are the times I meditate in the silence of my chambers. Do you know why I do this? I do this so that I might center myself, listen to the currents of the galaxy. There are others who center themselves by achieving a moving meditation, where operating on the minds of machines achieves a similar calm in one's own mind.
In my initial video, I said that her response to repair and computer use was the same, but I was wrong. It's nearly identical, but on the repair side she says,
There are others who may achieve this in occupying the mind, in achieving a moving meditation where operating on machinery achieves a similar effect.
And in the computer use side she says,
There are others who center themselves by achieving a moving meditation where operating on the minds of machines achieves a similar calm in one's own mind.
It's the difference between working on machinery and operating on the minds of machines. The former is hardware, while the latter is software. But moving on, if you have a high enough skill in computer use, you can continue to work on T3-M4 to the point where you unlock a final procedure of both repair and computer skills. Once it's all said and done, you find that Kreia was right. You gain wisdom, experience points, and you recover some of your lost connection to the Force, improving your pool of usable Force energy. But what you also fully develop is a moving meditation with T3-M4. If T3 is damaged, you can use this ability to recover Force points and I assume repair T3 in the process. This is something that can also happen in real life. I'm sure we've probably all experienced this. You're doing something and you just get into this zone. But there's two different types that come to mind. The first one is like the one being described in the game. When I open up my computer to fix something, or to clean it, or to upgrade with new parts, there's a certain calm. This calm no doubt comes from having a clear goal set in front of me. This is what I have to do now, so it's getting all my attention and I'm not thinking about anything else. This is less so when I'm trying to repair my computer because if something is wrong, I get more worried, since my financial situation can make buying replacement parts difficult. putting an end to Krea's conundrums. But when it's maintenance or upgrades, it's the only thing on my mind, and everything else fades into the background. But there's another type of zone that I sometimes get into. The one instance that always pops into my head was my last year of high school. I was driving to school one day, and at some point I just blanked out. Maybe I was thinking about something else the whole time, but I'm not sure. Next thing I know, I'm pulling up to the school about to park the car. A girl I was sweet on was waving to me, and I waved back, but I was wondering where the time had gone and how I got there. I kept driving the whole time. I was worried, hoping I'd never do that again. Some people could drive a car into a ditch or worse. This is an island. I could have woken up as I was taking to the sea. I think I looked this kind of thing up on one of the school computers that day. Apparently it happens to people who play musical instruments a lot. They play all their notes perfectly while thinking about something else entirely. For all I know, I was a much better driver while I was in this trance, giving people the right of way, using all my turn signals. I figured it's something that occurs due to repetition. Musicians practice the same thing over and over again for a performance, and I took the same route to school every day.
Very well. Then know this. All situations contain within them the potential for violence. To know how to hold that violence in check, to restrain it, and use it to hold the situation to your advantage is the way of any wielder of the Force.
Any and all situations can potentially devolve into violence, either by you or someone else. Imagine you're at a party. At any given moment, you can decide to start throwing fists. Your actions are what you are directly in control of. Even if at this party, someone is insulting you or attempting to negatively impact you in some way, there is strength in control. I would argue that it's not just for Force users. You maintain your composure and use that calmness as a tool to get your way. Or you can maintain your composure and determine that violence is the appropriate tool to get your way and use it effectively. She tells you to hold it in check, restrain it, use it to your advantage. What you don't want to do is fly off into a blind rage, throwing haymakers. But I think this goes a step further. You don't want anyone else doing that either. I said that your actions are what you're directly in control of, but that doesn't mean you're powerless when it comes to the actions of others. That's why Krea didn't specify if this violence is coming from you or anyone else. Holding the violence of others in check, or to restrain it, can also be effective in taking advantage of the situation.
There are many secrets that the Force may not unlock, for they are not things of life. To uncover such secrets can allow you to see events more clearly. It can grant you more weapons, more wealth, and allow you access to places and their secrets that can often turn the tide of a battle or change events.
Once, when I was in my teens, I saw a program on television about how lock mechanisms work. One day I returned home from school only to realize that I had forgotten my keys inside. Remembering the information I gathered from the program, I decided to try and pick the lock. I took some supplies out of my school bag to use as tools and successfully picked the lock. When I told my mother, she was confused. I was told that I shouldn't have been able to do that, and most likely broke the lock in the process. But it was fine. Maybe I do have some sort of talent for getting past locks, but I wouldn't say it's my favorite skill or the one I'm best at. The Force can't unlock security devices, whether digital or mechanical, since we all know that the Force flows through all living things. This is why security expertise is so important. It's one of those skills where it really needs to come from you, because the Force certainly can't help you. If you have this skill, then everything you can get with the Force, you can get, and everything you can't get with the Force, you can also get. But what are you getting? Supplies, but more importantly, information. Information, aka knowledge, is power. Power to, like Krea says, shift the tide of a battle or change events. Entire governments have been brought to their knees due to information being uncovered by an adversary or by becoming public knowledge. Code breaking, espionage, all-around information warfare are powerful tools. Now the reason the enlightened prince and the wise general conquer the enemy whenever they move, and their achievements surpass those of ordinary men, is foreknowledge.
That is a skill I know well, to know the knots of muscle, the currents of blood within the veins and flesh. It is a galaxy within the galaxy. The ability to heal is also the ability to harm, and the inability to heal what is damaged can also bring about harm.
Every person's body is a galaxy of blood vessel hyperspace lanes and inhabited by trillions of individual cells. This reminded me of this side-by-side image I saw some years back. On the left, you see the neural distribution of a brain cell, and on the right, a simulated matter distribution of the cosmic web, aka the universe. As you can see, they look quite similar, leading some to speculate on the possibility that our reality is the product of some being's imagination. Kreia says here that the ability to heal is also the ability to harm. With the ability to heal, you hold someone's life in your hands. If you're good enough, you can bring them back from almost certain death. In such a state, they'd be powerless to stop any manipulation you do to their bodies, whether healing or otherwise. Their shell is yours to heal, harm, or modify. What she says afterwards is a bit trickier. She says the inability to heal what is damaged can also bring about harm. The statement makes me think of someone's parents. Your parents have great influence on you, but if your parents were absent in your life, that would also greatly influence your development. Still, there's a few ways to take this statement. If you can't heal a wound properly, then it could get infected, and an infection can lead to your death. It could also mean that due to lack of skill, accidental modifications can occur, resulting in worse functionality and overall quality of life. Misdiagnosis is also a concern, as well as over or underdosing of medication. This may be Kreia's best skill. In a different, non-force sensitive life, she may have been a doctor, but I don't think it's her favorite.
Very well. Then know this. How some situations play out depend on who is perceiving them and whether they are being perceived. Your ability to control the perception of others in such situations will allow you to manipulate events to resolve them peacefully or violently.
I would say that stealth is close to being my favorite skill. Like Kreia says, it allows you to control the perception of others, and that allows you to manipulate events. If you're in a situation where you can perceive your enemies, but they can't perceive you, how the situation concludes is now in your hands to decide, peacefully or violently. The point is, by using this skill, you are now in control. Stealth is another skill that Kreia is quite proficient in. We know that she was extraordinarily talented at force powers that centered around stealth and concealment.
There are techniques in the Force where one can cloud the memory of others, make their presence so small as to be unnoticed. And on the worlds where we have encountered these Jedi, there is much life and death where sensing such things is difficult.
Old woman?
Yes, mistress.
I do not recall seeing her.
But she's also proficient when it comes to this skill. When Kreia levels up in-game, you can see that her class skills are Treat Injury, Awareness, Repair, and Stealth. More on the others later, but take note that Stealth is a skill she practices. As you level her up, she also learns Force Camouflage. Her grand mastery of stealth force powers are starting to make sense. Remember what I said about hard work and talent? Well, she obviously has the talent, but she also practices the skill, and when you do that, your force powers become even stronger. That's why she's so good at concealing herself. For me personally, stealth may not be my all-time favorite skill, but it may very well be my best skill. My brother jokingly suggests that someone needs to put a bell on me because I keep sneaking up on people. Many times have I seen people jump in fright in front of me because they didn't realize I was standing right next to them all of a sudden. Sometimes I know exactly what I'm doing. Other times I accidentally sneak up on people. I rationalize that I don't want to bother people with my noise, so it's not difficult for me to walk softly, stay quiet, or to sit still.
Very well. Then know this. Your ability to perceive the environment around you extends not only to perceiving dangers, but the awareness of the motivations of others. As there are dangers in your environment all around you, there are similar dangers and threats lurking in the minds of others. To see these things sometimes is enough.
Your skill in awareness allows you to read your surroundings to locate people, beasts, and traps, to perceive things that others might not, or things that others do not want you to perceive. It is the hard counter to stealth. People can be dangerous. People can be toxic. How can you find out who is what? Through observation, by studying their actions and reactions. You don't necessarily have to find out exactly what their intentions are. Like Kreia says, sometimes it's enough just to know that they're up to something.
Distrust is an effective shield and should be carried always.
One example that sticks out to me is when you meet Atreus for the first time at Telos Academy. She chastises the exile for fighting in the Mandalorian wars, but with enough skill and awareness, the exile can see the truth.
What? What do you mean? You're wrong, just as you were when you defied the Council.
Denial is the most predictable of all human responses.
Atreus wanted to go to war against the Mandalorians too. She looked up to the exile if she was female, and was in love with the exile if he was male. But she was afraid, and she lacked the strength to overcome that fear. The fear of losing her status as a Jedi. The fear of turning her back on the people she wanted approval from. The Council. In her mind, if you're not a Jedi, then you're automatically a Sith and on the dark side by definition. Awareness is one of Kreia's class skills. She's also very good at reading people. You would have to be in order to best manipulate them. However, awareness may be my weakest skill. Many times have I been in a situation where I can't locate something, only to have someone come along and easily find it. Reading people is also not my strong suit. Social cues can easily fly over my head. But what I can be relatively observant of are people's words.
The ability to persuade others is a powerful weapon, perhaps more so than any lightsaber. It is a strength to defeat an opponent without combat, to convince them that your will is right or just, or will simply benefit them in a way that they had not perceived. Examine their actions and the why of how they do them, and when you achieve such understanding, more truths may be revealed.
The pen is mightier than the sword. I don't think she needs to add the perhaps in her assessment. Persuasion is more powerful than any lightsaber can hope to be. One man can gun down tens of people as an act of crime or during a war, but a politician, in a position of sufficient power, can start that war. Or pass a bill that, for example, renders any form of healthcare illegal. Over time, they can kill millions. The greatest mass murderers the earth has ever known have been kings, emperors, premiers, and presidents. One anecdote that comes to mind is something that happened fairly recently. This country didn't have any form of fully public health assistance, until one day they passed a bill to approve one. It was a half measure, middle ground type of system, but it was something. It still garnered many opposers, one of which was a politician who used his right to obstruct procedures. Meanwhile, a part of the country was currently suffering through the wake of a natural disaster. People needed help, and the government had to allocate funding for a relief effort. But the aforementioned politician was still obstructing as a form of protest against the current healthcare system that had been recently introduced. In the past, people would die because they couldn't afford private health insurance. In the present, people were dying because of the recent natural disaster. And this politician wanted to repeal the healthcare bill, which would ensure that even more people would die in the future. And there were people, not even other politicians, but citizens, that would argue that he did the right thing, that healthcare needs to go. Persuasion is the art of manipulating someone's mind and realigning them to be closer to your own. It's like inception, a small change in the mind that could potentially lead them down a completely different path. Many might say that saying it like that makes it sound nefarious, but remember that the term manipulation is neutral. Having been used for nefarious reasons so often is why people default to it being a negative. Remember how I used it earlier when speaking about healing people?
Have you learned nothing? Healing is manipulation, and if you do not realize it yet, then you will discover that an act of healing depends largely on your perspective.
The ability to persuade people to see things my way is my favorite skill, and I think it might be Krea's as well. It is the purest and most direct form of manipulation, and I may argue that it creates the largest echoes. Unfortunately, neither of us are particularly good at it.
I speak with a voice that will never move others. I speak with a passion that goes unheard.
But that didn't stop Krea from wanting to prove her rightness regarding the Jedi, the Sith, and the Force. And that hasn't stopped me from practicing it, whether face to face, but also on the internet, especially on the internet, because communication through the internet is mostly through text, and according to the media richness theory, text communication is one of the worst forms of communication, making it a significant challenge, and methods need to be developed. The media richness theory is a framework used to describe a communication medium's ability to reproduce the information sent over it. If you've ever played the game of telephone, then you'll know what I mean. At one end, the message could be as simple as, "The monkey climbed the tree," and by the time it gets to the other side, it's mutated into, "The tree ate the monkey and flew to Vegas." The media wasn't rich enough to produce the information exactly as intended. There are three different types of arguments: logos, pathos, and ethos. There's also kairos, but it's not relevant to what I'm trying to say. Simply speaking, logos refers to arguments of logic, pathos refers to arguments appealing to one's emotions, and ethos are arguments that appeal to the authority or credibility of the presenter. My arguments tend to rely heavily on appealing to logic. Where I'm from, most people tend to be more responsive to arguments that appeal to their emotions. I was never able to be very persuasive there. Emotional arguments don't come naturally to me, and I still haven't figured out a way to translate my arguments into emotional ones. If I can figure that out, then who knows what I might be capable of. It can make peer bonding significantly easier. You can't convince someone you find attractive to spend time with you by using logic. Depending on who you are, you may even have more success with ethos, but it needs to primarily be emotional. People don't want to spend time with someone because they think they should. They want to spend time with people who make them feel good, who make them feel happy or makes them laugh. On a good day, I can maybe get the laughing part down, but it's not reliable. Krea wanted to prove her rightness, but couldn't do it with words alone. Krea's persuasion stat starts at 5 and doesn't change no matter what.
The true war is waged in the hearts of all living things, against our own natures, light or dark. That is what shapes and binds this galaxy, not these creations of man.
Instead, what is she good at? Stealth, awareness, treat injury, and repair. Stealth to conceal her identity, especially from Jedi Masters you encounter throughout your journey. But I feel an individual like her in her situation would be cautious, and concealed herself on some level to basically everyone, perhaps less so to the exile.
That perhaps it is important to me that you see me and my actions uncloaked. It is important that your judgments, whether be good or bad, stem from seeing me as I truly am.
Awareness to know what and who to manipulate, when to manipulate them, and how to manipulate them.
Atris, I have always been here.
As with her talent and skill in stealth, her skill in awareness could explain why she's so extraordinarily proficient at reading minds, even from people trained to resist it.
Get out of my head!
Stop struggling. Let me follow the current. Deeper to its source.
Stop! Stop! Ah!
Ah, with the fear is mingled guilt. It squirms in you like a worm. And the why? Ah, and there is its heart.
Treat injury is a skill we see her use multiple times as well. You can use it to manipulate people, but you can also withhold it to manipulate people. But there are two instances in particular that stick out.
I have saved your life, beast. That makes it mine. Ah, the wound is not a mortal one. Though it has been some time since I exercised my healing powers, there is a shred of life within you still. A gift from your master, no doubt.
And she also practices repair. We never see her fixing anything, but we do see her go through seemingly secure doors. A door that couldn't be picked. It was magnetically sealed through a panel. It might be a stretch, but still, this could be an instance of Kreia simply following her own advice.
Take your greatest weakness, devote effort to it, strengthen it, and I will show you how it shall strengthen your power in the Force.
After this video is over, consider telling me in the comments, in real life, which skill would you say is your favorite, and which skill would you say is your best and your worst? Kreia concludes this lesson into skills by saying the following.
Skill does not always draw from the Force, but it is a measure of power nonetheless. It can grant knowledge, help steady oneself when one's thoughts are in chaos, or grant enlightenment. Much can be achieved without the Force, as you know. Life continues, persists, and may be helped or harmed as a result.
Skill in lightsaber combat, for example, is well known to be enhanced by the Force, but it's just like any other weapon. The Force is not an obligatory requirement to use one. The Force is a source of power, but it isn't the only one. Power can come from within. The more you practice your skills, the better they become, and in effect, the more powerful you are. Developing your skills will grant you knowledge. I don't see how it can't. I learned a lot from losing weight. I learned a lot from starting a YouTube channel. I learned a lot by interacting with and debating people in my comments section. Are you feeling stressed or overwhelmed? Take a step back and work on something you enjoy. And yes, video games count. Play an instrument if that's your thing. Repair something, do some coding, whatever. Use something you love or gives you a clear objective to bring yourself into the state where everything else fades away and center yourself. If your thoughts are in chaos, steady yourself and then tackle the issue with a clear mind. Kreia says that much can be achieved without the Force, as you know, referring to the exile, since she lived without it for years. Life doesn't suddenly come to an end without it. Of course it continues. The Force flows through life, but it's not essential for it, which indicates that life in the galaxy didn't start because of the Force, which means the Force wasn't always there. It must have its own origin. Even so, after all this time with it in place, removing it can help, but it can also harm the individuals it flows through, either directly or indirectly. The trick is deciding whether or not the pros of removing it outweigh the potential cons. But even if it's not the Force but something else, and it's a net detriment, once people grow accustomed and dependent on something, they will fight to protect it. But we all know Kreia's position on the topic. It's kind of an open question on whether or not deafening the galaxy to the Force would have also killed a percentage of the population. But even if that were the case, it's obvious that Kreia was willing to go down the history books as being a villain if it meant removing the Force's influence from the galaxy, what she considered the greater good.
Now I am tired. Leave me to my meditations.